G'day, my name's Nurchin, and today we're looking at a very famous cryptid for a very odd reason. Because less than 100 years ago, this creature actually existed. It's the Thylacine, aka the Tasmanian Tiger. The Thylacine was a carnivorous marsupial found in Australia and New Guinea, most prominently in Tasmania. It was a top-heavy canine with small rounded ears, a pointed face, and a long thin tail. It also had a very unique black stripe pattern down the back half of its body, which led to the tiger part of its nickname. But, as we know, it wasn't even closely related to the tiger, and was far closer to other carnivorous marsupials like the numbat, quolls, and the Tasmanian devil. Like all marsupials, it had a pouch, its scientific name roughly translating to pouch but with dog face. But this pouch was unique, because the Thylacine could use it to tuck away and protect its genitals. Excuse me, sir, I'm gonna have to quickly check inside that bag. Oh. Okay, carry on. Despite what people thought, this creature was actually very shy. It lived nocturnally and spent most of its days sleeping inside burrows or empty logs. It was carnivorous, though there's speculation about its diet. We know its staple was small things like wallabies and birds, but we're unsure whether it often hunted larger things like kangaroos, or if it mainly stuck to smaller species due to its specialized jaw. It could also open its jaw very wide. I'm not sure why. Probably just a party trick. Millions of years ago, this thing was quite the apex predator, but times change, and for the Thylacine, they didn't end well. Now, there are a few reasons this creature went extinct. It wasn't solely due to humans, but as per usual, we played a large part in it, both accidentally and intentionally. Believe it or not, but the accident actually happened around 4,000 years ago. It's believed that Asian seafarers may have accidentally left a species of dog on Australia that later became the modern dingo. While the Thylacine and the dingo wouldn't have fought each other, they had very similar prey. The difference is the dingo had a much more versatile diet, while the Thylacine would only eat fresh meat. The indigenous Australians later learnt to hunt with the dingoes, which put more pressure on the Thylacine. Then the Europeans arrived and made a bad situation worse. This creature preferred to live in grassland and scrub, which is unfortunately great land for raising livestock. In one fell swoop, they lost most of their land, and they were villainized for killing sheep. It's later assumed they had nothing to do with the sheep killings. Nevertheless, they were hunted ruthlessly, with bounties being paid for each one killed. In 1936, as the species rapidly dwindled, conservation was started. By this time, it had completely disappeared from the Australian mainland and solely resided in Tasmania, thus leading to its nickname. But the conservation was too little too late, and 59 days later, the species was declared extinct. It's worth noting that even without human intervention, many species went extinct from Australia thousands of years ago. It's uncommon for species like the Thylacine to survive, and unfortunately, it couldn't adapt to the life of modern man. Even today, we're actively trying to preserve this creature's living relative, the Tasmanian devil, and it isn't going that well. It isn't surprising that a similar mission was unsuccessful almost 100 years ago. Unfortunately, when a species lives on an island as small as Tasmania, it can reduce their genetic diversity, making them more susceptible to diseases and reducing their survivability. Yes, well, that's all awfully morbid. But if it actually existed, then how can it be a cryptid? Because, by definition, a cryptid is a species not recognized by science. Science recognizes the Thylacine, it just recognizes that they're all dead. But, even to this day, there are many sightings and even photographs of this creature still kicking. So you may be wondering, is this thing still real? As far as the scientific community is concerned, the Thylacine is extinct. It's actually a bit of a poster boy for extinction alongside the dodo. But extinction isn't always as definite as it may appear. Due to how hard it can be to track animals in the wild, usually the title of extinct is applied well after the fact. This ambiguity has led to some species returning from the grave with something called Lazarus taxa. A good example of this is the coelacanth, a species of fish thought to have gone extinct 66 million years ago, but it was found again in South Africa in 1938. Or, if you think that we're better equipped now than the 1930s, a species called the Wonderwoi tree kangaroo was actually found in New Guinea in 2017 after being thought extinct for almost 100 years. There are many creatures like these two that defy the odds, and I want you to keep that in mind when considering the existence of the Thylacine. When it comes to the research of cryptids, we always have an abundance of anecdotal evidence. Some people said they grew up alongside the Thylacine and didn't even know it was supposed to be extinct until many years later. Plenty of people have seen them, and I'm not talking about a local legend or the occasional cryptozoologist. I'm talking park rangers, scientists, biologists, and these people are convinced, and there are so many of them that others are inclined to believe them. But definitely not everybody. Anecdotal evidence is typically pretty weak and often dismissed. I know sometimes I'm guilty of that myself. Questions are raised like, why didn't these people try and take a photo? Or why didn't they try and capture one? But I think there are explanations to these that are pretty straightforward. As I mentioned before, these creatures are nocturnal, so if one of them is out and about, it's gonna be pretty difficult to get a good photo. This is a photo I took with a Galaxy S9 at night, one of the best commercially available mobile cameras, and you can't see a thing. So while people do have their phones on them all the time these days, I can forgive the lack of photos, especially considering this creature probably lives in the middle of the Australian bush. And as for why people didn't capture this thing, tiger. Tasmanian Tiger, not Tasmanian Chihuahua. I think it'd be a pretty cool way to get hospitalized, but I don't think most healthcare covers attacks from extinct predators. But I get it. You want something more tangible. And in this case, we kind of have it. Unfortunately, nothing like a live or even dead specimen, but photographs and footage have appeared online, taken either by mistake or by people who hunt the creature as a hobby. Since the declared extinction, rewards have been offered for evidence of a living thylacine, with the live capture of one passing $1 million. Despite this, all the camera equipment used in these hunts appears to be really low quality or just old. But there's lots to look at, so let's hop into it and have a look at some of the more prominent thylacine photographs and footage and see how valid they may be. Here I am, in the internet. Now, this first video has quite a few views, but no matter how much you slow it down or zoom in, it's very little evidence of anything. Now, this second video from the same uploader is a little more interesting. It shows the creature, similar to before, with very little ability to discern anything, but it moves in a hopping motion. The thylacine was really top heavy, so it would have moved similar to this. But if you look closely, or if you look at all, you'll notice the creature's favouring its right foot. So it was probably just a dog with a limp. But this channel has disabled all its comments on all its videos, so he probably doesn't want to be told that. This next clip is from the BRT, the Booth Richardson Tiger team. But unfortunately, just like before, the image quality is so low, I can't discern anything that I would consider evidence. Yep, pretty much. And I'm not going to explain that first clip, because I think it's a bit silly to consider that evidence at all. There was an image captured from an Australian man CCTV last year that some people thought may have been the creature. It's a pretty good likeness, especially with the faint stripes, but it doesn't appear to be a real thylacine. It looks far too small, its ears are too pointed, and its heel is a lot higher than that of a typical thylacine. It was far more likely to be some kind of short-haired fox or just a fox with mange. Mange, the creator of cryptids. After looking at a few photos of possible thylacines, it often appears to be some kind of mangy fox. And on the note of appearances, the thylacine has appeared in its fair share of games, including Crash Bandicoot, Pathfinder, and its own game, the Tasmanian Tiger. Well, that looks like enough internet for today. Internet! Existence. Does this thing actually exist? This is unlike any cryptid we've looked at so far. It isn't an alien, ghost, vampire, or dragon. This thing actually existed. Its nocturnal lifestyle and incredibly isolated habitat may explain why this thing hasn't been found, and truckloads of witnesses may suggest it could still live. I think it still exists. Saying that, I'm fully aware of my own biases. I think it's cool because it's Australian. I think it's interesting because it's a cryptid. And honestly, it makes me hopeful that maybe some other species have survived the terrible scourge that is the human race. So, use a keep cup, stop using single-use plastics, and hopefully I won't have to do a video on the blue whale or the rhino. I truly hope one day you can come back to this video and tell me they actually found one, and I'll be more than happy to strike it off my cryptid list.